The first time the woman called the police on him, Marcus Reed was standing in his own backyard flipping burgers for his grandson. By the end of the week, half the city would know his name. And before it was over, the same woman who tried to throw him out of the neighborhood would be standing in front of cameras begging people to stop asking questions. Smoke drifted lazily through the warm evening air as Marcus pressed a spatula against the grill. The scent of barbecue sauce mixed with charcoal and fresh-cut grass. Somewhere behind him, music played softly from a speaker near the patio. For the first time in months, the tightness in his chest had eased. "Grandpa, mine better not be burnt this time," 12-year-old Jordan called from the lawn, tossing a football high into the air. Marcus smiled without turning around. That happened one time. It happened twice. Second one was extra crispy. Jordan laughed and caught the ball against his chest before falling dramatically onto the grass. Near the patio table, Marcus's daughter Vanessa arranged paper plates while talking on the phone with someone from the hospital. Even outside of work, she carried herself like an emergency room doctor, focused, efficient, always moving. Marcus looked around the backyard and let himself breathe. The house was smaller than the one he and his wife had shared for 28 years, but after Lorraine passed away the previous winter, the old place felt too heavy with memories. Every room echoed. Every hallway reminded him of who was missing. So Vanessa convinced him to move closer to her family. Harbor Point Estates was exactly his style. The neighborhood looked too polished, too controlled. Lawns cut with surgical precision, white fences that all matched perfectly, people who smiled without warmth. Still, the backyard was beautiful. And Jordan loved having space to run. "Dad," Vanessa said, hanging up her phone, "the neighbors across the street keep looking over here." Marcus glanced up. An older couple stood near their driveway, pretending not to stare. A younger man walking his dog slowed down just enough to study the backyard before continuing. "New family curiosity," Marcus said calmly. Vanessa didn't look convinced. Before she could reply, the side gate swung open hard enough to hit the fence. The woman who stepped through looked like she had rehearsed the entrance. Perfect blonde hair, pearl earrings, expensive sunglasses perched on top of her head, and eyes already filled with judgment. She marched across the patio without introducing herself. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Who exactly gave you permission to be here?" The yard went silent. Marcus slowly lowered the spatula. "I'm sorry." "This property," the woman said sharply, gesturing around with manicured fingers. "Who authorized you to use it?" Jordan stopped smiling. Vanessa straightened immediately. Marcus kept his voice calm. "Ma'am, I live here." The woman stared at him for a long moment. "No," she said flatly, "you don't." Marcus blinked once. "I beg your pardon." "I'm Cheryl Whitmore," she announced, "president of the Harbor Point Homeowners Association. I would have been informed if this house had sold." "It did sell," Vanessa replied before Marcus could speak, "to my father 2 weeks ago." Cheryl ignored her. "This community has standards," she said coldly, still looking at Marcus, "and there are procedures before occupancy." Marcus set the spatula down beside the grill. "I completed every legal requirement attached to the property purchase," he said evenly. "Perhaps you weren't updated." Her lips tightened. "That's impossible." Jordan slowly walked closer to his grandfather. Vanessa crossed her arms. "My father bought this house legally. Is there a reason you walked into his backyard acting like this?" Cheryl finally glanced at her. "There's no need for hostility. You came into our yard accusing him of trespassing." "I came because neighbors are concerned." Marcus looked around. Nobody looked concerned. They looked curious. "There's excessive smoke," Cheryl continued. "Noise, large gatherings." Marcus glanced at the small speaker playing old jazz at barely audible volume. "It's 4 family members and a grill," Vanessa said. Cheryl's eyes drifted toward Jordan. "And who is he?" Jordan frowned. "I'm his grandson. We have regulations regarding long-term guests." "He's 12, Vanessa said incredulously. Marcus could feel tension building under his skin now. He had spent 35 years as a state judge. He knew exactly what disrespect looked like when it walked into a room pretending to be concerned. But more than anger, he felt something else. Recognition. He had seen this before. The assumptions. The suspicion. The immediate belief that he couldn't possibly belong somewhere like this. Cheryl took one small step backward and folded her arms. "You know what?" she said loudly. "I don't feel comfortable with this situation." Marcus frowned slightly. "What situation?" "You standing there holding that metal object for starters." Marcus looked down at the spatula in his hand. Vanessa actually laughed from disbelief. "You cannot be serious." But Cheryl was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Jordan's face changed instantly. The confidence disappeared from his eyes. Marcus felt it like a punch to the chest. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "there is absolutely no reason to involve law enforcement. You're making me feel unsafe." "You walked into our yard," Vanessa shot back. Cheryl raised the phone dramatically. "Yes, hello," she said loudly after dialing. "I need officers at 18 Harbor Lane immediately. There's a suspicious man in the neighboring yard refusing to leave." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "There are children present," Cheryl continued into the phone, "and he's waving metal tools around aggressively." "That is a lie," Vanessa said. Jordan moved closer until his shoulder touched Marcus's arm. "Grandpa," he whispered. Marcus placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's all right." But it was. The next 10 minutes felt endless. The music had stopped. The burgers burned quietly on the grill. Neighbors stood outside pretending not to watch. And Cheryl remained near the fence with the satisfied expression of someone convinced she controlled the outcome. Then the sirens came. Jordan jumped at the sound. 2 patrol cars stopped hard outside the house. Doors slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. Officer Daniel Hayes pushed through the gate without knocking. His hand rested near his holster the moment he saw Marcus. "Step away from the grill," he ordered. Vanessa immediately moved forward. "This is his property." "Ma'am, step back. He owns this house." "I said step back." Marcus slowly raised both hands. "I understand there's been a complaint," he said calmly. Hayes looked him up and down. "Identification." Jordan stared at the officer in confusion. The second officer remained near the gate watching carefully. Marcus reached slowly into his back pocket. "My wallet." Hayes nodded stiffly. Marcus handed over his license. The officer studied it. His expression shifted slightly. "This address matches." "Yes," Marcus replied quietly, "because I live here." Cheryl stepped closer immediately. There must be some mistake. Nobody informed the HOA about this transition. Marcus watched the officer carefully. The disappointment on the man's face was obvious. Like he had arrived expecting danger and found paperwork instead. Still, he didn't apologize. Instead, Hayes handed back the license with visible irritation. "Well," he muttered, "looks like everything checks out." Jordan tugged nervously on Vanessa's sleeve. "Are they taking Grandpa?" Marcus heard the fear in the boy's voice. And something inside him hardened. He reached slowly into the inside pocket of his jacket. Officer Hayes stiffened. "Hands where I can see them." Marcus removed a leather credential wallet and opened it. The gold badge inside caught the evening sunlight. The officer's expression changed immediately. "I'm Judge Marcus Reed," Marcus said calmly, "Superior Court of Illinois." Silence crashed over the backyard. Hayes blinked. Cheryl's face lost color. The second officer straightened instantly. Marcus held the badge steady. "Now," he continued softly, "would you have entered this property the same way if you knew who I was before arriving?" Officer Hayes swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I apologize if—" "That's not what I asked." The officer looked trapped. Marcus lowered the badge. "This woman falsely reported me as a threat in my own backyard." Cheryl recovered enough to force a nervous laugh. "This whole thing is clearly a misunderstanding." "No," Marcus said. The word landed hard. "This was a decision." He looked directly at her. "You decided I didn't belong here before speaking to me." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the neighbors watching from across the street looked uncomfortable now. Hayes finally cleared his throat. "We'll document the incident appropriately." "I expect you will," Marcus replied. The officers retreated quickly after that. Cheryl lingered only a moment longer before turning and walking away without another word. But the damage remained behind. Jordan cried quietly that night. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silent tears while asking questions no child should have to ask. "Why did she think you were dangerous?" Marcus sat beside him on the guest room bed. "Some people fear things they don't understand," he said carefully. "But she didn't even know you." Marcus looked away for a moment. "No," he admitted, "she didn't." Vanessa paced the hallway afterward, furious enough to shake. "We should sue her." "Not yet," Marcus said. "She lied to police." "I know." "She terrified Jordan." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know that too." Later that evening, Marcus found an envelope taped to his front door. Official HOA notice. Violations listed in bold print. Excessive smoke. Unauthorized gathering. Community disturbance. Improper outdoor conduct. $500 fine. Vanessa stared at the paper in disbelief. She actually doubled down. Marcus read every line carefully. Not because he needed to. Because details mattered. After decades in courtrooms, he understood something most people didn't. People who abuse power rarely stop after one victory. They escalate. The next morning, someone knocked softly at the back door. An older woman stood outside, holding a cardboard file box. "My name is Alina Morales," she said quietly, "and I think you need to see something." Inside the box sat years of documents. HOA notices. Photographs. Complaint letters. Handwritten statements. Marcus spread them carefully across the kitchen table while Vanessa watched. "What is all this?" "Evidence," Alina replied. She pointed toward a photo of a smiling Asian family standing beside moving boxes. "The Chens," she said. "Cheryl fined them 14 times in 6 months." Another photo. A black couple with twin daughters. "The Harris family. Noise complaints every weekend. Police called twice." Another. An elderly Hispanic widow. "She got fined because her grandson visited too often." Vanessa looked sick. "She's been doing this for years." Alina nodded. "She targets people she thinks won't fight back." Marcus studied the papers quietly. Patterns emerged quickly. Minority families. Single women. Elderly residents. Always the same cycle. Complaints. Fines. Pressure. Eventually the home sold. usually below market value. Marcus leaned back slowly. Who bought the properties afterward? Elena's eyes narrowed. That's the interesting part. Vanessa opened her laptop immediately. By sunset, they had uncovered enough to make the room feel colder. Most of the homes ended up purchased by one of 3 real estate companies. Different names, same mailing address, and all connected to a developer named Richard Lowell, Cheryl Whitmore's longtime business partner. Vanessa stared at the screen. She wasn't just pushing people out because she didn't like them. Marcus nodded. She was profiting from it. The realization changed everything. This wasn't simple prejudice anymore. It was a business model. And Marcus knew exactly how dangerous people became when money entered the equation. 3 days later, Harbor Point held an emergency HOA meeting. The clubhouse overflowed with residents. Marcus arrived with Vanessa, Jordan, and Elena. Conversation stopped when they entered. Cheryl sat at the front wearing a white blazer and the expression of someone still convinced. She controlled the room. For the first 20 minutes, she played the victim perfectly. She described herself as frightened, concerned, attacked, a loyal community leader, unfairly targeted by accusations. Then Marcus stood, and the room went silent. "I have a simple question," he said calmly. "How many white homeowners in Harbor Point have received police visits during backyard barbecues?" Cheryl's smile twitched. "That's irrelevant." "Is it?" Marcus lifted a stack of papers. "These records show a pattern of selective enforcement going back nearly 8 years. Murmurs spread instantly. A man near the back raised his hand. "She fined me because my son's friends parked on the street during graduation." Another woman stood. "She threatened me over my mother's wheelchair ramp." One by one, people began speaking. Fear cracked. Silence broke. And Cheryl lost control of the room. By the end of the meeting, residents demanded a formal investigation. But before a vote could happen, the clubhouse doors opened. Councilman Edward Price entered carrying a folder thick with papers. Proxy votes. Enough to keep Cheryl in power. The room erupted. Marcus watched carefully. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was protection. The system around Cheryl extended farther than anyone realized. After the meeting ended in chaos, Jordan was suspended from school. A boy in his class repeated rumors about Marcus being a criminal judge who threatened police. Jordan shoved him. Vanessa exploded when she learned the school board included Cheryl's sister. "They're targeting a child now." Marcus sat quietly in his study, that night staring at old photographs of Lorraine. For the first time since moving, doubt crept in. Maybe he should have ignored it. Maybe peace mattered more. Then he opened one of Lorraine's journals. A folded note slipped onto the floor. Her handwriting covered the page. "Marcus, if you're reading this during hard times, remember something. People count on exhaustion. They count on decent people deciding the fight isn't worth it. Don't hand them victory by walking away from truth." He read the note 3 times. Then his eyes drifted toward an old photo tucked behind it. The picture showed their new backyard shortly after moving day. And in the background, mounted beneath Elena's porch roof, sat a security camera. Marcus froze. The next morning, he was at Elena's door before sunrise. "Please tell me that camera still works." Elena stared at him, then slowly smiled. "Oh," she whispered, "you thought of it too." An hour later, they sat together watching the footage. The camera angle captured Cheryl's fence line perfectly. And what it revealed changed everything. Before calling police, Cheryl stood outside calmly watching Marcus grill. No fear. No panic. Only irritation. Then the audio caught her voice speaking to another neighbor. You have to stop people like that immediately before they settle in. Vanessa covered her mouth. Jordan stared at the screen wide-eyed. The footage continued. Police arriving. Officer Hayes entering illegally without permission. Cheryl smiling while Marcus was questioned. Then Jordan spoke quietly from the couch. I have something too. Everyone turned. Jordan held up his tablet nervously. I was recording a video that day. The footage from his tablet was shaky and uneven, but the audio was crystal clear. Cheryl's voice cut through the speakers. People like them always claim they belong here. The room fell completely silent. Marcus looked at his grandson differently in that moment. Not just as a frightened child, but as someone brave enough to preserve the truth. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus moved carefully. He filed complaints with the Civil Rights Division, the State Housing Board, police oversight, financial crimes investigators, and finally, one investigative journalist he trusted deeply, reporter Allison Grant. When Allison saw the footage, she immediately requested interviews. Then came the article. Hidden pattern of discrimination alleged in Harbor Point community. By morning, the story was everywhere. Television crews appeared outside the neighborhood entrance. Former residents started calling. More evidence surfaced daily. Emails, threats, property transfers, financial records. One former resident revealed Cheryl herself suggested selling quickly to Richard Lowell's companies after repeated HOA fines. The pressure built fast. Then the city announced a public hearing. And suddenly, Cheryl Whitmore looked nervous for the first time. The hearing room overflowed before it even began. Reporters lined the walls. Residents packed every seat. Marcus sat calmly beside Vanessa and Jordan. Across the aisle, Cheryl arrived with attorneys. Councilman Price looked pale. The hearing started with Cheryl speaking first. She claimed misunderstanding, harassment, political targeting. Then Marcus approached the podium. And everything shifted. This case, he said steadily, is not about one barbecue. The room quieted immediately. It is about a coordinated pattern of discrimination designed to pressure vulnerable homeowners into leaving their homes for financial profit. Cheryl interrupted angrily. Oh, please, you people always turn everything into race. The room froze. Marcus looked at her calmly. What people, Mrs. Whitmore? She realized her mistake instantly. Too late. The damage was done. Marcus nodded toward the projector. The footage began playing. First, Elena's security recording. Then Jordan's tablet video. Every lie, every expression, every hateful word, displayed publicly for the entire city. Gasps spread across the chamber. Councilman Price stopped making eye contact with Cheryl entirely. Vanessa testified next. Her voice trembled with controlled fury. My son cried himself to sleep believing police might take his grandfather away because someone decided a black man cooking in his backyard looked suspicious. Jordan testified too. Small voice, shaking hands, but brave. She lied, he said simply, and grown-ups believed her. The simplicity of it hit harder than any legal argument. Former residents appeared by video call afterward. Story after story. Nearly identical. Harassment, fines, pressure, forced sales. Then Allison Grant approached the podium with documents proving shell companies tied to Richard Lowell purchased at least 11 homes below market value after HOA targeting campaigns. And campaign donations from those companies flowed directly into Councilman Price's reelection fund. The room exploded. Price looked like a man realizing cameras had trapped him permanently. By the end of the hearing, emergency motions were already underway. Cheryl removed from HOA authority. Financial fraud investigation launched. Officer Hayes suspended pending review. Councilman Price referred to the Ethics Commission. Reporters chased Cheryl outside as she pushed through the crowd. Did you target minority families? Did you profit from forced home sales? Why did you lie to police? She never answered. 1 month later, Marcus stood in the same backyard beside the same grill. But everything felt different. The gate stood open. Neighbors walked in freely carrying food. Children laughed on the lawn. Music floated through the evening air. No tension. No fear. Jordan stood proudly beside the grill, wearing an apron 2 sizes too big. You're flipping too early, Marcus warned. Jordan grinned. I'm an artist. You're burning the buns. That's flavor. Vanessa laughed from the patio while helping Alina arrange desserts. Across the yard, former residents mingled with current neighbors. People who once stayed silent now spoke openly. The HOA board had been replaced entirely. New anti-discrimination oversight rules passed unanimously. The city created a legal support program for homeowners facing housing harassment. And Richard Lowell had just been indicted on fraud charges. Marcus looked around slowly. This was what victory actually looked like. Not revenge. Not humiliation. Just people finally able to breathe safely in their own homes. A nervous couple approached, carrying a bowl of potato salad. We owe you an apology, the husband admitted quietly. Marcus recognized them. They had watched silently the day Cheryl called police. We knew she was wrong, the wife whispered, but we were scared to speak. Marcus studied them for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fear makes people quiet, he said. What matters is whether they stay quiet forever. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for fighting anyway. Jordan suddenly tugged Marcus's sleeve. Grandpa, burgers are ready. Marcus turned toward the grill. Jordan held out the spatula proudly. The same kind Cheryl once described as a weapon. Now just a cooking tool in a child's hand. Marcus took it gently. Smoke curled upward into the fatting summer sky, while laughter filled the yard around him. For weeks, this neighborhood tried to convince him he didn't belong. But standing there surrounded by friends, family, and neighbors finally willing to stand together, Marcus realized something important. Belonging was never something people like Cheryl had the power to grant. And it was never something they could take away. Jordan bumped his shoulder lightly. You okay, Grandpa? Marcus smiled. For real this time? Yeah, he said softly while looking over the crowded backyard. I think we finally are.